Hi everybody, welcome back to watching some of my videos. Now that you've learned how to do some of the basics such as centering, opening, and lifting, and you've learned how to make bowls, learning how to pull them up and widen them out, giving them some volume and some form, and then learning how to throw taller cylinders for your mugs, and then eventually moving on to making your 8-inch tall cylinder that can still hold enough volume such as a water bottle. You've kind of mastered all the beginnings of what I show in my class, but I want to give you lots of opportunities to make a variety of other forms. Once you have learned how to make a cylinder, all other forms are possible from there by taking them and widening them out and shaping them. And one of the first forms that students want to learn how to do after they've learned how to throw a cylinder is how to make a lidded jar. I'm going to demonstrate a couple different for you today. There are actually hundreds of different forms of lids that go along with jars, but there are two main types, and I'm outlining both those behind me today, and I'm going to show you how to do those. It's sort of up to you which one is a personal preference for aesthetics, meaning which one you like the look of better. And then also, some people find that this form is easier to make than this, and other people find that this is easier to make than this one. I'm going to start with this form today, which is going to be a pot with a gallery. A gallery is going to be a little ledge just inside the rim of the form for where the lid can sit. The benefit of this is that the lid is very, very easy to make. However, making the gallery on here can be a little problematic for some students. But we're going to take you through that step and show you how to do that. Second, I'm going to demonstrate the other form, which is going to be where you have a simple pot. This was thrown as a cylinder, rounded out, and I didn't worry about making the gallery whatsoever at all. There's nowhere in here for a lid to sit. But what I've done on the lid is I've given it what's called a flange, F-L-A-N-G-E, and that's going to be the part that sets in there and locks the lid on so it doesn't fall off when someone picks it up. This one right here locks it on by having the gallery. This one locks it on by having the flange. And so we'll start out by making the pot over here, over my right shoulder first, where we have the pot with the gallery and a simple lid sets right on it. So for this, we have all the regular tools that we've used before in the other videos. I'm going to lightly wet the vat down. And I'm going to make a jar a little bit bigger than what I showed you before. That little blue one is pretty small. So I'm going to use a 2-pound ball of clay. And I'm going to pat it out of the wheel just like usual. And I'm going to center it just like we have everything else you've made before. So I'm compressing that clay, squishing it in and down, using my palm to press in and my thumb to press down. And really, really compressing that clay. As you get to working with bigger pieces of clay, it's going to sound strange, but you have to not only center the outside of the clay, but you have to center it all the way to the middle. Once I have it centered, I'm going to open this form just like I would a mug or a cylinder. Thumbs go in, down to my ring finger, and they pull straight across, so I have a nice flat base in there. Next, I'm going to lift it, just like we did with our other forms. Moving my hands nice and slow. And a little tip that I give is holding your thumb right on the top. Resting that up there so that you're kind of compressing the lip of the pot, keeping it from getting too skinny because we have to put that gallery in there. And also it kind of holds the top of this pot steady while I'm pulling underneath it. So I'm squeezing the clay, lifting it up. And here's where personal preference comes in. The question is, when do we create the gallery? Some people like to create it very early on so that they know it's already there by the time they finish pulling. Those people are smart because that way they know it's done, and when they're lifting up the pot, they don't have to worry about getting too thin while they create the gallery. Some people like to wait till the very end so that they don't create it and then mess up the rim by reaching in. I usually do it about halfway to 3/4 of the way through. What I tend to do, and this is what works for me, not for everybody, is I kind of throw my pot in 2 stages. I throw it to get my height, and once I've got my height, that's when I'll create the gallery, and then I'll give it some shape. So if I was throwing a vase, I would throw until I feel like I've got my height, and then I would start shaping it out, which is what I'm going to do now. Before I give this a little bit of roundness to the pot, which I want to give a little bit of form, not just straight up and down, I'm gonna create this gallery. So here's how I'm gonna do that. Getting this wet on the rim, I'm gonna put my hands on here, left and right hands, as if I was going to pull up this top little bit. Notice I've kept it a little bit thicker than the rest of the pot. And while I hold it with my left and right hands, my left thumb is going to press down right along the top. If I don't hold that rim while I'm doing this with my other fingers, the rim is just going to start wobbling. I have to hold it inside and outside while my thumb goes down and in. Doesn't need to be really deep, just enough for a lid to be able to sit in there. So right now I have the lip of my pot and I have the gallery. Now what I can do is go through and shape that pot a little bit. In my last video is about throwing a tall cylinder. I showed you how it was almost like a dance. If I want the pot to get wider, my left hand leads and my right hand follows. And when I want it to go back in, my right hand leads and my left hand follows. So putting it on here, my hands are just going to slowly work up and my left hand takes over and presses out a little bit. And when I feel like I've reached as wide as I want it to go, my right hand takes over and my left hand leads. And I've given it just a little bit of curve there to have a little bit of a belly on the pot. So now that I've made my pot, it's now time to make the lid for it. So as usual, when I finish up a pot, I'm going to trim away a little bit on the bottom. That's a good place for the wire to go. Notice also when I press that in, it lifts up the edge of the clay just enough so that I now have a bit of a grip to grab when I'm dunking it in a glaze. And I might decide I want to put a couple little lines around the outside for some decoration so the glaze can set in that and pool in there. It might also give me a good idea to put one color on the bottom and one color on the top and let them overlap a little bit. All right, pot is made. It's now time to make the lid. One important step before I can make the lid is I need to know how big to make it. So I'm going to be measuring this pot. And here's where beginners first get a little confused. Where do I want to measure? For some, that's going to be very, very obvious. For others, it might take a little struggle. So I'm just going to point it out for you here. Since I'm making a lid, such as this one right here, I'm going to want to measure the inside of the gallery to the other inside of the gallery, that ledge where the lip meets the gallery, so that I know that this pot, when I measure it the same, will fit right in there. So my measuring is going to go from inside of this wall to the inside of this wall here. And measuring this, it looks like it is just a hair under 4 inches. So I'll now set this aside to dry. And while that's drying, I will make the lid. And I made a little extra lid to show you how to finish them also at the end of this video. So setting that aside, in front of the fan for about 10 minutes, probably not a whole lot more. As you're getting better at throwing, you're going to find that you need to let your pieces dry a little bit slower. They're going to take a little more time to even out their moisture levels. And when you're making multiple pieces, such as in my next video where I'm going to show you how to make a teapot, you're going to have all sorts of different pieces that you have to keep all at the same moisture level without one getting drier than the other. Got a small ball of clay. This is probably way more than enough for what I will need. Since I'm making a video, I want to make sure I don't have too little. So my lid is going to start out upside down. Now I made this one pretty flat, but usually people make their lids a little bit more domed. I'm going to show you how to make one a tiny bit more domed for my lid over there. But I want to make sure that this measurement is the same as I had on my pot, which was 4 inches. I'm going to throw this upside down. So as this clay spins, I'm going to center it and I'm going to throw it just like a little bowl. Squeezing that clay and compressing it. And all I'm going to do is open this up like a very shallow little bowl, pull my thumbs out, until I've created a very shallow little bowl, hopefully about 4 inches. Right now I'm just a hair over. So obviously if it's a little bit small, we know to pull it out further. But what if it's a little bit too big? What we can do is use our wooden knife and simply just take some clay off. Now normally I would take a tiny bit off, but since I know I have a whole lot of clay, which is what you should be doing as a beginner, having too much, having a little bit extra, I'm going to take off quite a bit of clay here until I know that I've got enough clay for the pot, but not a whole lot extra. Now, much smaller ball of clay. Put my thumbs in, and I'm going to pull this out just like a little bowl. Smoothing up the edge. Until I've got just about the size that I want. And there we have our 4 inches. I'm going to cut this off, and I'm going to set this aside to dry. What I'll do later, towards the end of this video, is I'm going to show you how to make a knob or a handle for this lid that will allow you to put it on top there and still get your hands around it. So we'll set that aside to dry, and while that is drying, I'm going to show you how to do the second type of pot. This is the one where the pot is going to be basically a simple vessel. No gallery, nothing fancy on it. Instead, the lid is going to be a little bit different. So, throwing our vessel, just like before, thumbs go down and in, pulls wide out across. And I'm going to lift this pot up. Just like I would my tall cylinder. Now once you've already seen me throw a tall cylinder, there's not a whole lot of reason for me to do this again, other than to make a pot for the lid. I could have used another pot just over on the shelf, but I think there's always a chance to learn more techniques. And one of those is a very simple, giving us throwing rings or throwing lines on here. What one of my professors like to call wheel information. So right now if I use a wooden rib, I can press the clay against that, and that takes away all the roughness. It makes it really nice and smooth. And as a potter, it's good to be able to know how to make your projects nice and smooth. You want your work to be pretty when you want it to be pretty. Other times, it's good to show a little bit of your handiwork in there, that it's not so perfect, that it's okay to have a little bit of information about how the pot was made. So using a wooden knife and this rounded edge of it, and slowing my wheel down, just simply dragging this up along the edge. Puts a nice consistent spiral in there. It's very pleasing in the eye, satisfying to watch, right? And now not only do people have a little bit of texture, they can feel it when they pick up the pot, but also the glaze is going to pull in those little grooves. It's going to make deep, dark colors. It's going to make light colors where the glaze breaks over the edge. Sometimes smooth is pretty, and sometimes leaving a little bit of texture on the pot is nice as well. So I've made my jar. Notice there is no gallery on it. There's no need for it because I'm going to throw a different type of lid which has the flange, such as the project right over here. However, I do want to make sure that my rim is not rinky-dink, super skinny, fragile, going to be easily chipped. We don't want that. So I did fatten it up a little bit by simply resting my fingers on here and pressing down with my pointer finger on my right hand. That's going to help make that a little bit stronger, so when people use your work, they don't feel like it's too fragile to be able to be used. Before I finish this and work on the lid, I have to do the same thing I did with the last pot I threw. I have to measure from the inside to the inside. So measuring this one, it looks like I am at 3 1/4. So I'm going to make that lid right now, which is a very important part of the process. As clay dries, it shrinks. We all know that. This clay shrinks about 6-7%. So if I made this project, put it in front of the fan and it got bone dry, and then I measured it and made the lid, this clay would have already shrunk. I would make my lid too small, and when it shrinks, right down in it would fall. We've all done that before. I have done it. Probably every potter I know has done that before. Got my bat on. Got my piece of clay. And just like my last lid, I'm going to be making a lid like this with the flange, and I'm going to be making it upside down. So I'm going to start out by centering a small ball of clay. Again, I recommend it's better to have too big a ball of clay than not enough. However, I would tell you, just like as a beginner, when you first started working on your 2-pound ball of clay, it probably felt kind of tough to center a bigger ball. Now that I've been working with pieces of clay up to 25 plus pounds before, centering a 1/2-pound ball of clay is difficult for me. It's not something I do very often, and it's really small for my hands. So just like before, I'm going to open this ball of clay into a little bowl shape, but I want to make sure that this rim is nice and fat. I don't want it to be too skinny, because that's where we're going to make the little flange. So I've opened it up, and I'm going to measure this, and instead of like the first pot where I measured the outside of the lid to the outside of the lid to make sure it would fit down inside on that little gallery, I want to measure about the middle of this wall, right about there to right about there. And I'm shooting for 3 1/4. Luckily, I've hit it right about there. So if you remember back when we were making the pot with the gallery, we split the top in half. We're going to do the same thing with the lid here. It's just going to be on the lid instead. So left hand goes on the inside, right hand goes on the outside, and my thumb is just going to press down. This time it's my right thumb. Press down right into there. And that is going to make the flange that's going to set right inside the lid of my pot. So now that I'm measuring it, I see that something has changed. Just because I had opened that up at 3 1/4 inches, where my eyeball told me it was, doesn't mean that it stayed the same. When I measured this now, I'm seeing that it's even less than 3 inches. When my thumb pressed down and in, it pressed in a little too much, and I'm measuring from the outside of this flange to the outside of this flange here to make sure it will fit down inside my pot. So I need to pull it out more. Luckily, that's very easy to do. All I'm going to do is pull this out like I would making a bowl wider, lifting it out a little bit, now remeasuring. 3 1/4. Good, we've hit it. Now that I have this, my pot has been drying in front of the fan for about 5 minutes. This will set in front of the fan for just about 5 minutes as well. And this is going to dry out a little bit quicker than my pot will. Okay, it's a very small form. It's got a lot of surface area compared to the volume of it. I'm going to cut this off and set this aside. Now that you've learned how to make 2 different types of jars, and you have 2 different types of lids with them, in the next video, short one following up right here, I'm going to show you how to make handles on top of your lids so that they can be grabbed by the top. Okay? Thank you all for watching. Have fun.